Well, hello, good evening. Welcome to the good old chat. I would have thought by now I've managed to get the right screen behind me. I was just about to say good evening and welcome to the Portugal Show, which I can remedy immediately now. There you go. I can do the thing I wanted to do. Good evening and welcome to the Portugal Show. Good morning, Portugal, of course, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. A bit confusing if you're tuned in from America. You won't know what's happening now. Actually, to let you know, the truth of the time here in Portugal right now is 1 minute past 10. That is now the right screen. It's Tuesday evening, the 24th of November. And on a Tuesday on the Portugal Show, we welcome our expat elder, the grandmother of this community, Jacqueline Mary Brown. Here she is now. Good evening to you, Jacqueline. How are you?
I'm awesome.
Awesome. That good, huh?
Yeah.
Great. And you're looking mighty fine. Your hair looks fabulous tonight. I thought you'd been to the hairdressers. You said you just tied it up.
Yeah.
It's a great
do tie it up.
You got a sort of beehive going on.
I've got a lot of hair. No, it's just tied up in one of those scrunchy things.
Excellent. I wish I could do that.
No, I took the same on you.
Those days are behind me.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we already have the wonderful Sapphira Joel tonight from Porto.
Right.
Good evening to you, Sapphira. You are a mainstay of this institution. You're an institution with an institution. And tonight, ordinarily, we look at positive news, happy homesteading. I've got a few questions to ask you, happy homesteader, tonight. We do have one major Portuguese positive news story to share. But before we go to that, find out what sort of week you're having, Jacqueline. Apart from being awesome, what's going on for you? What's on your mind? And what might you like people to talk about this evening on the show?
Well, you're going to talk about the homesteaders. Let's start from there.
Yep.
I'm sure it'll lead somewhere. And I've just had it's been quite a difficult week in some ways, and I had a big explosion. I don't often explode, but I had a big explosion and just got in touch with a lot of things that I had suppressed for a long time. I didn't know I was suppressing, so I actually find those things sometimes quite good because I was just really surprised. And it just helped me later on get my mind straight. But in the process, I used some words which I would rather have never heard in my life. It sort of reminded me of a barroom brawl, or we're in the army now, you know.
Really? Well, you've been swearing, basically.
I was, yes, I was.
Fantastic.
And I just thought, okay, and it sort of something I just welled up in me, and I thought, I've had enough of a particular thing, which I won't mention because it involves people, because it always does, doesn't it?
Yep.
I think God puts people in our lives actually to straighten us out in our reactions to them. So I think there's a lovely phrase in the Bible that says iron sharpens iron, you know. We need to file the edges off each other. And
yeah.
So I've had a few edges filed off me, and I think I've probably filed a few off someone else with a lot of shock, really.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Nice Christian ladies are not supposed to speak like that.
No, it's true, isn't it? And this is something I suppose we've grown up with as a stereotype of the religious, pious, or spiritual person. But I always think to myself, should Jesus have ever stubbed his toe, I imagine he would have just, maybe sworn and let it go, and that was it, done and dusted. That to me is mastering. Is to deal with what's going on in the moment and move on and not carry it with you.
Absolutely, yeah. So, sort of clears the air. He did actually crack a few whips in the temple and called some of the people a brood of vipers.
Yes.
which wasn't quite the word that I use, but
Oh, I see. I'm so intrigued now. When you said you had an explosion, because recently you had a microwave I thought you were referring to your domestic explosion, but this is more
no,
of a personal one.
this was more of a sort of people type explosion.
Amazing, amazing. Well, that's part of the function of the show on a Tuesday night with you as the grandmother of our community here, a pastoral element, I think, to our output, where if someone's struggling a bit with something, and I know we didn't like this phrase before, did we? But it's in that realm of the agony aunt. I'm not calling you that, but that's just to give the people a context. If there's something you want to share, talk about, get off your chest, Tuesday night is the perfect night to do it because Jacqueline's here. I imagine with some pithy wisdom to share and support you with, and I'll do my best as well.
Well, I was a pastor for years, so I'd rather be called pastoral than agony.
Yes, of course.
You keep freezing.
I'm just putting it in. Oh, do I? I think it might be something to do with our connections tonight, which hopefully let's lay our hands on those connections and see if they settle down a bit. We'll breathe through it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Tell me more. You were a pastor for some years.
Yes. There's a sort of house, more what you'd call a house church, because I've always believed, ever since I first believed, that things started at home. And so that's how it was. It just grew really from having people at home and then meeting as a more formal group, and just before that I'd been on a ministry training and I got ordained into that.
Oh wow!
It was, but I'd never had any ambition to sort of like start a church in a community. Everything I've done all my life has come out of home. And I think I've said before that I really strongly believe that if you can't do it at home, starting with your own family and then expanding that into your community, then you can't do it anywhere. I think you're frozen again, Carl.
Have, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm back again now. I'm not sure what's going on. It must be a sign from the universe or the heavens that you speak more than me tonight.
Wow.
Well, I didn't know that about you. We've been working together for a few weeks now, and I didn't realise that you had performed that function for people. So there you go, a pastoral moment. A Tuesday evening. We're about the happy homesteading. We're about the positive news in Portugal, and of course, should you wish to get anything off your chest, which occasionally we do need to do that, don't we? As you suggested this week, you vented.
We've gone all together now, Carl. So. Yes, I did vent this week, and I think it sometimes, I think it's so easy to put on a face. You're back with us. You just.
I am. I don't know what's going on, but carry on.
Yes, I was just saying that, we're so busy sometimes being nice or wanting to be nice that we can get unreal sometimes.
Yeah.
Or wanting to be loving, and sometimes. Our idea of love is a little less than love always is, because love is telling the truth and about ourselves most of all. And, the truth does have a way of setting you free, which is another biblical quote, as you know.
Yeah. And I find that interesting. So love is telling the truth. That's not we don't hear that very often. And then that truth might be measured or used on ourselves first and foremost. That's quite something, isn't it? No wonder people prefer a bit of romantic love to that.
Oh, yes. Romantic love can sort of take us into a fantasy world, which is also very useful at times.
Yeah, of course. And that leads to the other bit you were talking about, where we rub the edges off each other. But the romantic love can get that started, can't it?
Yeah, that's good.
Fantastic. Okay, so there's the invitation this evening. It's. I know this is a difficult format potentially for people to open up, but if you're an expat, I mean, wherever you are, whoever you are, it's not exclusive. But this is basically an expat community that we serve, plus a few other interested individuals. If you've got something you want to talk about tonight, and it would help to talk, we are here. You can join us on the screen. You can talk to us through the comments. We're here for you this evening, and that's how we tend to roll on a Tuesday night. As well as talking about positive news in Portugal and Happy Homesteading, I do want to talk about the state of the Happy Homesteaders group on Facebook. I'm a little bit disappointed. That's what I'm going to get off my chest tonight. But before I go there, let's have a look at this bit of positive news. The lowest number of new virus cases for Portugal for 13 days. I don't know if that's coming up on the screen. Yes, it is. Excellent. We can tell you tonight, thanks to Natasha Don, who wrote this article today for the Portugal Resident. Today's COVID numbers show not only that the new case numbers are progressively coming down, but that Portugal has tallied the lowest number of new cases in the last 13 days. That means that despite the high numbers currently in hospital, this level of pressure should, in theory, start reducing over the course of the next week. Nonetheless, the number of deaths, which will always be the final aspect to come down, in inverted commas, is still high, 85 today, sadly. The majority, 50, as always, in the north of the country. That's been the trend. It's been the north that's felt that worst. Excuse me. For a look at the official numbers, you can click on a link in the article there at the Portugal Resident. For a look at a borough by borough analysis, there's also a link as well, which is there for those who want that sort of detail, showing the proportion per 100,000 inhabitants that are positive. And that, of course, determines how locked down you are, for example. Smaller boroughs like Sabrash and Sabrash de Alportel or Algezire, for example, only need a handful of residents, less than 20 in the latter case, to take case numbers over the so-called safe limit of 240 inhabitants per 100,000. Another plus point about today's update is that the number of people who tested positive and have now tested negative and deemed recovered, even when many of them never felt ill in the first place, has also increased massively. So we are up in recoveries by nearly 7,500 in the last day, which is fantastic because you don't hear that very often, recoveries. It's all about the gloom and doom that tends to support the lockdown measures, isn't it, with the numbers that you hear. This means that the number of so-called active cases has also reduced. So hopefully this is going to change things. I don't think it's the only thing that's going to change things, but because some of that is down to us, which we'll probably talk about tonight. But reports this afternoon, the article continues, however, are focusing on the high number of people in hospital. The high number of new internments over the last 24 hours is plus 34, and the fact that the ICUs now have over 500 seriously ill people. So, yes, love and best wishes to them and their families, obviously, from us. Yesterday's figures showed 90 people had been admitted to hospital in the previous 24 hours. So, in fact, today's number of 34 is a very marked reduction. Great news. Yesterday's numbers also showed 498 people in ICUs. Therefore, the increase by 8 to 506 isn't a massive rise, more a consequence of the high numbers that are being treated in hospital as a result of the high number of infections registered 2 weeks ago. Thus, says Natasha, if one looks at today's numbers without looking at media headlines, that's a very candid comment, isn't it, given that she's part of the media. I love contributions to this Portuguese space of ours. Thus, if one looks at today's numbers without looking at media headlines, there is a lot to be positive about. They suggest measures to reduce rates of transmission must be working. Questions now are along the lines of, can the government deliver on its pledge to roll out the vaccine in January? This was the message from Health Minister Marta Temido on Sunday although logistical issues are still very much unanswered. Says Sick, the media channel. We know the armed forces and civilian protection are involved in that operation, that TAP has made itself available to support transport. I think it's owned by the government now. They should do, shouldn't they? But the strategy for large-scale immunisation is still unclear, and according to Director General of Health, Graça Freitas, will go through pharmacies. The Technical Commission on Vaccination against the new coronavirus, appointed earlier this month, awaits information from manufacturers on phase 3 of clinical trials to determine strategies and recommend priorities and specific measures. At the moment, there are still a lot of uncertainties over the organisation of priority groups and the vaccination criteria. So the uncertainty continues and moves to a different area. Meantime, Graça Freitas has been closing in on the burning subject of Christmas, saying she hopes current restrictions will be able to be softened. It all depends on how the situation develops, she said, as the country anticipates the first of 2 long weekends of December, where 10.2 million people will be confined to their boroughs of residence. That is an unprecedented thing, isn't it, in Portuguese history, I would have thought. Even in a dictatorship, I don't suppose that many people were confined to where they lived. Maybe they were, I don't know. I'm talking through my hat there, and I would welcome any clarification on that from anyone listening. So anything in there of interest to you, Jacqueline?
I get a bit hot under the collar when we talk about COVID, really.
Go on.
Because and it's also actually brings up something that I wanted to say about communication. There's somebody just come up from France. Welcome.
Hello, Gillian. We will answer that question. It's a lovely question. It's a slow and leisurely chat tonight. That's what we do on a Tuesday, but we'll stick around and we'll certainly answer your question. So welcome here. Your first time with us on the Portugal Show. We'll be delighted to answer that question.
Yes. Yes, communication, because if you wet, I noticed this with somebody I was talking to, that if you talk about conspiracy at all, people think you're talking about there isn't a COVID virus. And that's not what I mean about conspiracy when I talk about conspiracy. It's because I think there's a lot of conspiracies going on in the background of all sorts of things with people who have vested interest in things, because you always get that. It happens with everything. And that, it's very hard to sort those things out and to know exactly where we're being manipulated or where the government are maybe overstepping their control over people, and whether that is effective overall, not just with the virus, but actually with health, with mental health, with all of the other things. We don't really ever hear the awful things that it's actually doing to people being locked away.
Yep.
And that, so many elderly people who probably were dying within the next couple of years or something, or even shorter than that, were being kept from any, were being kept in isolation, where they were lonely and afraid and not in a home, not in a family home.
Yeah.
So that they were not able to see anybody, and the entire fear thing that came up with all of that. So I think there's there's a lot of things to really think about, why certain things are happening and why certain measures are being taken. And it could be that they're just being blindly taken because somebody started the ball rolling in some situation.
Mm.
And I just think we need to think sometimes a little bit about those other issues and children. What it was, how are children being affected? I mean, you have young children, so I don't know whether it affects them at all, but they're being taught to be afraid of people. You know, don't come near me, don't breathe on me, don't touch me, don't, you know.
Yes, indeed.
And you know, that must have a big effect. And a lot of them are getting very traumatized. So I think that I personally, anyway, feel I have a lot of thinking to do, and we'll also need to be thinking about the vaccination as well, because you know, we're hoping it's going to be freedom for everything. Well, it's going, if it's the flu vaccination type of thing, then we've had flu vaccination around for years and years, and they have to be changed every year. So I think it's a little bit unlikely that this is just going to be a cure-all.
Indeed.
Forever. So I don't know that. I'm not a scientist. I'm not in that world. But if they found one now, I can't understand why we haven't found one before.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point, Jacqueline. And I think it appeals to that really hopeful side of humanity, doesn't it? You know, that bit. You know, let's face it. At this time of year, we're in the myth, aren't we, of the very simplistic idea that somebody's going to bring us presents if we've been good. Yeah. And it's not that far from that idea, is it? And you know, generally speaking, us human beings, we don't like complexity and grey area. So it would be much better, wouldn't it, to just go, okay, the government's got it under control. The scientists are working on a vaccine. The vaccine's going to sort it all out. We'll go back to normal. Now, I can understand why everybody would want to believe that. I absolutely do. But no, don't we? As you say, if you begin to think about it for a moment, it's probably going to not pan out quite like that. And there are, you know, there's a lot that needs to be thought about, talked about. And I think it's fair to say, as Natasha was saying in her article there, she was sort of speaking about herself as part of the media in a way, with a sideways glance at herself. You know, the debate isn't wide, is it? The debate is very narrow. And as you say, when anyone tends to bring in an unusual view or a non-normal view, they might get hounded or responded to badly. And I think now more than ever, we need a richness of discussion and respect for each other's opinions, rather than, okay, this is how it is, everybody shut up, apart from everybody who agrees with the main narrative. Because it does feel a bit like that sometimes, doesn't it? And I think we've done our best on this show to have as broad a possible base for discussion as we possibly can, and hopefully we'll continue to do that as well.
Yes, I think it's been great, actually. And I'd like the magic wand to wave over everything, and it's all going to be all right. And
yes,
but life is not necessarily quite like that.
It's not. And the other thing comes to mind, you know, New Year's Eve. What do we do every New Year's Eve? We sing a song, don't we? Should old acquaintance be forgotten, never brought to mind, for the sake of old lang syne. New year, put the last year behind us. Does that usually work out? Not often, does it? Humans being humans, they're dragging all their stuff into the next new year and coming from that place. So we're a complex bunch, and this is a real test for us at the moment. And my money's on, well, I understand why people want a quick fix and a magic wand and all the rest of it, because that's human nature. But I also recognize that we might have to be a little bit more, a little broader in our discussion and our understanding than that as well, which is, I think, what you're referring to partly as well.
And also, I think I've got a little bit of a rebel in me, because I hate being told to sort of shut up, sit down and keep quiet.
Yes, indeed. I have noticed. And I think there are loads of people like you, and possibly me in that regard. And it's nice to know, isn't it, that we're in good company. And that's, you know, that's no disrespect to anybody else and their views, but again, just a call for the widest possible debate here, and a respectful consideration of all opinions on this.
And to be, you know, I think sometimes we also need a bit of a sense of humour.
Oh, yeah.
Well, perhaps a lot of sense of humour. Goes back to the thing you said about New Year's Eve. You know, when I think of all the New Year's resolutions that I've made in my life.
Exactly.
They've lasted for 2 or 3 days, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's us. That's us. We've got to love us, haven't we? We've got to love the human beings.
Yeah, because we are funny.
Yeah, and it's something, a thought occurred to me that the COVID thing is something now that any religious leader would be quite jealous of. If you wanted to start a worldwide cult that determined how people behaved, and it was like, I mean, people would just throw it out. If it was some sort of cult leader saying, okay, everyone's got to wear a mask and stay so far apart and wash their hands every so often and stay indoors and this, that, and the other, the playgrounds are going to be shut. It would have just been like, get out of here. We're not doing all that for your blooming cult. What are you talking about? Lock him up. But they were doing the same things, but for a different reason. And it's, for me, it's very much like an ideological thing. When you stop and think about it, and I might be stepping into some really awkward and difficult territory here by saying this, but I think a lot of it now is ideologically driven because it's beyond people's direct experience. We are doing this on faith and belief, aren't we? And not just our own faith and belief, but the faith and belief of other people who we don't even know, who talk to us through the news and the media to say, okay, now next week you're going to do this. And it's all an act of faith and belief. And if it was a religious or spiritual context, it would be like, that's a cult. We're not being told what to do. But in the realm of where you're terrified about your health, and because it's people in white coats, and because it's governments who can fine you and lock you up, it's like, okay, we'll do that. No problem. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I'd love to know how they've managed to get so that they can confine us and lock us up. I mean,
I didn't expect to be going down that philosophical route tonight.
And I think enough said. I think we should actually answer the question of the lovely lady who's...
Indeed. We've amused ourselves possibly with
yes, because
COVID talk.
We are relating this to people coming to Portugal.
Absolutely, and don't let us put you off.
And you know, who doesn't want to come to some people? The nation that's sitting here arguing about COVID forever.
Absolutely. Although I have to say, the bread and water people, the Pão e Água movement, that is the coalition of restaurants, cafes, tourists, tourism businesses, hotels, nightclubs, all sorts of people in the service industry to do with hospitality and tourism, are gathering tomorrow to make their voices heard. And I fully support them with their industry being completely crashed and crushed and being offered quite a paltry compensation. They are on the streets tomorrow in Portugal. So I think it's quite nice to see that. And I think they should be looked after, having driven the economy of the country for the last, 50 years or however long it's been with Portugal as mainly a tourist destination. So I send my support to those brothers and sisters tomorrow. But back to your question, Gillian, by complete contrast here. Go on, Jacqueline.
Can I just interrupt there? So
yeah,
we could just turn that round and say one thing that is good for a reason for coming is you will get quite a lot of free speech still.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Because nobody has locked us down, have they, or shut us up? Or
No. And,
on the Portugal show.
No, certainly not.
A lot of people have been censored on Facebook and various other places. So
indeed.
We haven't had censorship.
No, we haven't. And long may that continue. So Gillian, hello, first time here. You're probably wondering what you've let yourself in for. But good evening to you, or should I say bonne nuit, or even, what am I saying? Bonne nuit, aren't I, if you're in France near Bordeaux?
Yes.
What would you say are 3 good reasons for me to consider moving to Portugal? So, certainly post-COVID. Well said. Well said, Gillian. Nice caveat there, given what we were talking about. What would you say? 3 good reasons for moving to Portugal. Do you want to start that ball rolling, Jacqueline?
Well, sunshine.
That was my first too.
But also good. Well, it depends where she comes from in France. She said, well, I'm trying to think where that is, but I can't get it at the moment. The food is very good here. There's still a lot of homegrown food. And there are some really, truly well-organised organic farms springing up all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But what I like about it, the food, is that when we first came here, I don't see quite so much, but you never passed a house, even if it was a sort of rather beautiful villa that didn't have, instead of a lawn, a vegetable patch, and where people grow things and they keep chickens and I think you do all those sort of things too. But I think that, you know, it's part of the whole culture of Portugal. And you know, I've got neighbours who bring me fruit. I've got neighbours who bring me potatoes, which are actually grown on my land because I rent out a piece of land. So there's that. I think that's lovely. There's a great deal of sharing goes on around food, which has sort of disappeared in countries where they have just a lot of fast food.
Yeah.
And people still do make a big thing about family meals.
Yes.
And I think that's a lovely. So we've got the sunshine. We've got.
I think that was three. That was sunshine, food, and people, or and family within that.
And they're very family orientated. The people.
Yeah.
Here.
That's a pretty good holy trinity of reasons to come. I'd be pretty much along the same sort of lines there. It amounts to quality of life, basically, is the one, you know, overarching reason, Gillian. It's really great that you asked that question and we can sort of lay it out so plainly, really. I agree completely with Jacqueline and her three reasons. And to me, it adds up to quality of life. And Bordeaux is about 2/3 of the way down France, fairly close to the coast. So I'm guessing you do get hot weather there. You'll get similarly hot weather in Portugal, and certainly a bit hotter, I would have thought, as you go down to the Algarve or into central towards Spain. You'll get a lot of the, you know, inland effect and higher temperatures. So it depends what you want. You know, as you go south of Lisbon, you're looking at 300 days of sunshine a year is what they say. And I think it's fairly accurate. It does vary from year to year, but you know, you'll be looking up in the sky in Portugal and you'll see this beautiful, intense blue sky, which to me is when I have my what I call the Portuguese moments, where you suddenly remember and realize why you're here, why you chose Portugal. And it is a lot to do with that beautiful blue sky. It's so much to do with the people. And it's, again, yes, so much to do. Obviously, the sun is the driver for the food in many ways. But part of the food thing is, as Jacqueline says, there is sharing, family life. I think Jacqueline's nailed it there with three very good reasons. And I would completely agree with those. So I hope that helps, Gillian. Yeah, I'm interested in your move from France to Portugal, actually, because for Brits, certainly France used to be a very popular choice, as did Spain. But I think Portugal is really doing it for people as well now. I don't know what the numbers are, but be interested to know what your motivation might be if you're happy to share that with us. Dave and Debbie Wynella here. Boa noite to you both. Great to have you both morning and evening. That's fantastic. Sintra's here. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, Jacqueline, Mary Brown. Good evening, Carl Munson. Ahoy from New England, the Cape Cod area. Fantastic. With the Knights Templar profile pic there. We're always nice to see that. Always reminds me of Tamar. We'll be here for a little while, but we'll watch the rest of the show tonight with more time. Please keep up the show. Continue always. Thank you for doing what you do. It's a pleasure, Sintra, especially when we get lovely comments like that. Nuno is here. Good night, everybody. Hello to you, Nuno. Great to have your company. Back to the vaccine for a moment. We have a vaccine now because so much time, effort, money, and science has been put into this in the last few months. We now have 3 vaccines. 2 have a 95% efficacy rate, and 1 has a 75%. I bet they're sore, though. The ones in 3rd place, I don't know if their teams are going to get fired. But that's really, it is amazing that amount of effort and claimed accuracy is in the mix there. I still have my reservations personally with that, but I mean, you know, for those who want a vaccine, that is incredible and fast work, isn't it? Yeah, incredible. Gillian saying thank you to our answers. I love France, but the weather as a driver as I love the sun. So yeah, I'm thinking probably for you, Gillian. If you like being near to the coast, it might be the Alentejo Algarve. for you might be your first port of call, pardon the pun, there, for the sort of life you're looking for. Speak French, so learning Portuguese may be an issue. That's an interesting comment, Gillian, because actually in central and northern Portugal, you'll find a lot of the older folks do speak French because they learn at school, and that was a real savior for me and my wife, because she spent some time in France and can speak French really well. When we couldn't speak Portuguese, a lot of the older folks in central Portugal, and I believe it's the case up in the north as well, can speak French. So that will help you in some ways if you're in a tight spot. But yeah, give one of our favorite teachers, Mia Ejmer, she does an online course. You can find that in our directory, Gillian. It's a nice and easy way to learn if you like learning online. You know, some people prefer a one-to-one teacher, but give Mia a go. And if you tuned in, Mia, I hope you're doing well. Lots of love to you this evening, and looking forward to having you back on the show soon. So, Happy Homesteading. You've got a little bit of a garden there, haven't you, Jacqueline? And you're one of these many people who joined our Happy Homesteaders group. The question to join is, are you happy to share pictures of your homestead? Everyone puts yes. And the other day, I let off a bit of steam yesterday. Like, all of you said yes. And this is what I've got so far. And I put a tumbleweed GIF up, because no one is sharing pictures of not even tumbleweed in their Happy Homesteads. So could you explain to us what you've got growing in your garden? Because I believe it's specially adapted for you, isn't it? And what your aspirations are as a Happy Homesteader. What's the deal for you?
Well, I've got a lot of land and it's on a slope, and I've been it was just completely chaotic when we first came here.
Yeah.
We've done a few things, so there's a sort of formal area around it. Because there was a swimming pool here, which is rather nice to look at. I got a lot of money to maintain, but that's rather nice. So around that we've got paved areas on which now I've got I had some troughs made. They look like feeding troughs, that sort of shape. And as planters to grow vegetables, and because they are that shape, so they narrow in at the bottom, I can get my wheelchair right up to them and sort of tuck my knees in and still get my hands dirty, because I love to be planting things. So that's really good. Why I haven't put pictures on is because I've tried and it hasn't worked. Because I just, I get, if it doesn't work for me the first time, I've got this huge block about technology. And somebody has to talk me through it. And then once I've done it, and I know I'm not sort of doing something completely stupid, I get the hang of it. I hit the live button once, apparently, on my Facebook page.
Yeah, you don't remember that day.
And it looks as if I was sort of demented, standing on my head and all sorts of things. But twice that's happened. Once when a person was here fixing my computer, so the whole world got the conversation that was going on.
Oh, fantastic.
And the other time was just when I was wheeling around trying to sort of get my computer working, and I didn't know I was on, and I took it off very quickly, but not before a few people saw it. It was quite funny, really.
So for you, it's a bit of a technological barrier with getting things up and for pictures from the garden in the Happy Homesteaders group. That's
right. So that, because then I've got, my house is on slopes, so there's a lot of, I'm beginning to terrace it.
Yeah.
So I hope to grow more things on the terraces and things like that. But somebody else has to look after that too.
Yeah, I think that's a matter of collaboration, isn't it? Which we're perhaps not so good at in the modern age. Just going back a bit, Gillian. Thanks, says Gillian. We'll have a look again. We'll have a look. Thanks again. Our pleasure, Gillian. We're here for you, and do think about joining our forum as well. Other questions gratefully received at the forum. over there at expatsportugal.com. Sapphira is saying, Joel, usually in high school in Portugal, when a student enters 5th grade, she can pick between French, English, and in some rare occasions, even German. And that was when I was in high school. Now kids start learning at least English from primary school. Yeah, of course. And that's another thing we're very lucky. I'm very blessed with, I think, Jacqueline, isn't it, is to have grown up speaking English. We don't know how lucky we are with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's amazing, actually, because I find Portuguese quite difficult to learn, but I do think that people are willing to help you, and they don't laugh at you like they do in some countries when you make the most horrendous mistakes. They do try to understand and talk to you. And I find that actually talking, may I say this, just the conversations when Portuguese people are talking together, it can sometimes sound like world war's broken out.
Oh yeah.
But you know, you have to be patient with it because they seem to use twice as many words to say a simple thing. But I remember going once. So this is for people arriving. Don't think they're all fighting each other when they're having a wonderful conversation. May I give an example of that?
Please do. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting cultural insight for sure.
Well, because this is another thing which was quite quaint. But when my husband and I first came here and got a car, we had to get it insured. And we were taken by a Portuguese person to somebody who did insurance. Well, it was actually on a farm, and he had an office in a barn. And so that was a bit unusual to start with. But then when we got there, the man they were talking to each other. He had been briefed about what we wanted, and so he was speaking for us. And they were going at it hammer and tongs, you know. And I said to, what did you say? And he said, well, I only asked him if he wanted third-party fire and theft or whatever it was, you know, or we'd ask that and they don't do that or something like that. But it seemed to go on for about half an hour going,
yes, indeed. Yeah, I reckon that.
You have to get used to, and they do tend to shout a bit sometimes. So,
yeah, and I've taken that. And Joel Sapphiro here, watching on YouTube with us, who's a real friend of the show and a really good guide for us into Portuguese culture. The sense I get when Portuguese people are communicating is they're actually quite authentic and vulnerable and direct in the communication, which I think is very good for sort of mental health and for healthy relationships, because it's said, it's expressed, and it's done. And it might seem a bit angry by British standards and a bit more expressed than British standards. But you get the sense that people have said what they've needed to say and dealt with it and addressed it, and that they can move on, going back to the New Year's Eve thing, which of course isn't necessarily the case in a British conversation. Is it? A lot of British society is based on, you know, repressed resentment. It's perhaps one of the many drivers of British culture is seething resentment just beneath the surface. And I get the feeling it's not quite like that in Portugal. It's a bit more Latin. It's a bit more self-expressed. And that, to me, is a whole lot more healthy. And of course, you know, we're not idealizing or overly romanticizing the culture. Of course, you know, it has its challenges as well. But in that department, it strikes me that people's relationships are fairly healthy because they're fairly direct with each other.
Yeah.
So
and they do a lot of hugging and kissing as well. So
yeah.
Which obviously is not happening at the moment, but I'm sure it will return.
Yes, indeed. Okay, and I'm sure Joel will put us right if that's a misapprehension of mine. So going back to Happy Homesteading, actually, when I started the Good Morning Portugal show, and it was obviously it was to do with helping people understand what was going on with the COVID situation, the pandemic, and letting people know what was, you know, what measures were in place and what was the right guidance for people, so that they might not get themselves into any unnecessary trouble. I thought we might be connecting a lot of people who are off-gridders and homesteaders and people working, on the land and on rural projects. And it's not necessarily turned out like that. We've got a fantastic demographic and a real mixed bunch of people. But, I'm trying to understand. I really want to understand how we can best serve people who are wanting to grow their own, become a little bit more self-sufficient, independent, but also interdependent, and collaborate with each other. People who might form communities as well in Portugal, because there's quite a few of those, and a lot of people love that idea of starting a retreat center that has a holistic vision, where there might be more than just a nuclear family there, or a single person. It might be a clan or a community of some kind. And I really thought what we might be in the middle of that, but it might be that people who are on projects working on the land are just too busy to be posting up photographs. They might just be spending all their time. The thing that's on their mind is sharing pictures. But are you all right there, Jacqueline?
Yes.
Okay. I would pass you my glass of water if I could, but for that one day. Oh, what's that? That looks interesting.
It's ginger and turmeric and honey and lemon.
Sounds great. Turmeric. That's a wonderful. What is it? A tuber, isn't it? Really good medicinal properties with the turmeric. Yeah. So we have. Just having a quick look at the group. We have, I think, 389 people on there. I've just let a couple more in. 388. And I thought every day there might be people posting up pictures of their veg and their fruit, and it might be that it is just that way of life is too demanding to then go online late in the evening and post up your pictures in the Happy Homesteaders group. But I do want it to be a useful facility for people and a bit of a network for people, because I don't want to be too sort of sounding too prepper or doom and gloom about it, because it could actually be a very positive thing. But I think it would be great to have a network of people who share with each other the tools and the information, and like actual seeds as well, seed sharing, permaculture techniques, forest gardening techniques. Will Thompson's here tonight. Look, with Will, with his alternative technology. So he's got a suggestion. What about doing a Blue Peter type of show with lots of regular slots themes, as in what a kind of how-to show with people on their land? Because when we did making our own toothpaste as a bit of a Happy Homesteader feature, that was quite popular. But that was because it was Mrs. M, I think, who joined us for that one. But doing these weird things like making your own toothpaste, setting up your own solar, setting up your own wind generator, power generator. These will be, I think, really useful / invaluable things for the future, where we can get off grid and not be so reliant on supermarkets, not so reliant on EDP, whose prices for electricity are exorbitant. It would be a really good strategy to do, not because we're being forced to out of fear and doom and gloom, but just like a really positive thing to do and a positive change for society. I mean, was that part of your plan, Jacqueline, with your where you live and how you wanted to live?
Well, I would have loved to have built a house. We were unable to do that, and probably that was just as well in some ways, but I would have loved to. I would love to build a house that was totally, or as much as you can be, off grid. But I'm very much on grid, and it's very costly where I am. And, so I can do some things in the garden, but of course I can't do very much myself. So it means at the moment employing somebody. But when we first came here, and then right up until COVID started, I always had people in the house one way or another. Other than the very first 2 years, but we'd done the same thing at home in England before we came here, which was, our house was, I don't think Steve and I, from the moment we got married, had ever been on our own. We always had somebody else either living there or somebody who wanted protection, or all sorts of different reasons why people come. that my house has always been God's house, really, just open to people who needed it. And I've been very blessed that he's always provided for me to do that. And now what I'm trying to do is shift that all onto sort of online in some way. I hope we get it back one day. But even with that, I'm less able-bodied to do it myself. So, but people used to bring all sorts of talents as well into that sort of situation.
Of course.
And so we did have, I remember one lady that lived with us for almost 3 years in the house I had in England. She loved to garden, and she grew things, and she knew more about, sort of composting and, planting things that went with each other. And
the companion planting,
yeah, how to keep weeds away and nasty creeping creatures without putting down pesticides in any way. And I learned a lot from her, and just different things.
Fantastic.
And that's it. That's always been, that's always been our art of.
Yeah, and I think you've taken risks, haven't you, by letting people into your home in a way that some people might feel a bit reluctant to do that.
Yes, I always pray quite a lot about it, and I feel the protection of God when I do those things. I've never been afraid. I live right out in here, in quite a lot of isolation, and one of my friends who's a lawyer came to visit me one day, and she was absolutely horrified that I never shut my gates or locked my door. I do that now because we've had, I felt I needed to.
Yeah.
And I do believe that I know what to do, that God always provides me with the information to do what's necessary. But I've never been afraid of the people that stay here.
It's interesting. Yeah, because I'm thinking for the future of homesteading and living in communities, people often think of the tactical skills that are needed, like how to grow food, how to do alternative technology, how to build things. But actually, the soft skills are just as important, aren't they? Like learning to trust, learning to communicate, learning to collaborate. All of those like community things, I suppose you could describe them, are really important as well. And they're perhaps things we've forgotten, but there's quite a good legacy of them in Portuguese culture.
Yes, they are. And I do believe that people need tender cultivation.
The little plants themselves. And that's right. That's right.
It's people that need it first.
Yes.
And so that's my heart, is that I want to bring out the things that I believe God has uniquely put into every person, and that needs to grow and flourish, and they need to then learn how to connect with God themselves and grow from there. So it's you learn a lot from seeds.
That's amazing. And of course, the big thing I've learned about growing recently is, instead of focusing so much on the seed and the seedling or the plant, is that the soil that seedling or plant is equally important, as important as the seed itself. And that's such a true kind of parable for human beings, isn't it? We are such creatures of our soil, our environment, and care that's given us. And we can see that in the world, can't we, at the moment? We really can.
And the roots.
Yes.
The roots to go deep.
Yes.
They need to go really deep.
Yeah.
And I was listening to somebody talking about a different way of gardening than I've ever heard of before, which starts off with layers of compost, and you started off. And I was thinking about the gentleman that you interviewed that was growing, reforesting in the...
Oh, yeah, in the Alentejo. Sorry, the
Yeah.
Algarve. Yeah.
Was it the Algarve or the...
It was the Algarve. It was the Algarve, yeah. Yeah, because it was desertifying, wasn't it? And he was doing something about that.
But this person then actually put a watering system that went right down into the ground, so that the roots were encouraged to grow down to get the moisture.
Yes.
And it grew plants that were twice as big as I've ever seen.
Amazing.
I immediately thought of that, because that's for me, again, it's a biblical quote that you need the roots to go down deep.
Yes.
And I think that's what we need to be. Talking of which, of course, if we believe what the Bible said, we were made from dust anyway, of the earth. And so there's probably a big affinity for us with earth.
I think whichever way you look at it, we are dust, aren't we? We are compost and dirt. And we are animated from that. I mean, even the most atheistic scientist, I think, or biologist would agree with you on that. We've got some lovely comments to share now. You have a neighbour request. I'd love to be your neighbour, Jacqueline, says Carmen. So a good evening to you, Carmen. And I love your offer here. My little whinge tonight about the Happy Homesteaders group has brought forth an offer of facilitation here. So I'm so delighted and grateful, Carmen. I really like the idea of sharing community seeds, knowledge, excess produce, a helping hand, community kitchen events. I've helped facilitate this in East Texas and can't wait to meet my new community in Genetish, San Miguel. Once I'm settled, I'm happy to help facilitate this, Carl. Thank you, Carmen. That sounds wonderful. Yes, so do stay in touch, please. Yeah, do short lessons, says Will. People touring their place to show how they do it. That's a great idea, Will. Yeah, Blue Peter style, lots of regular slots, themes, excellent. And this thing about communication, I mean, to be in community, I think you do need to learn how to communicate well with people, own your stuff, be able to be assertive, be able to express your needs. These are skills that I think are actually quite difficult for people because we're out of the habit. But oh yes, we do have resentment. He's talking about the Portuguese here, says Sapphira. The difference may be that when we're peed off, we say it to the face of the one that pees us off, which yes isn't very British, is it? So that's brilliant. We're getting a little insight into the Portuguese psyche there, which is always great from Sapphira. So a little bit of encouragement possibly there for the Happy Homesteaders as we approach 400 people in that group, and foster more of a sharing and a communication, really, how to. So yeah, Will, I'm sure I've got Will's ear on that as well, on how we might make it a bit more effective, I suppose. Or maybe it will take more of a kind of crash, an economic crash. Often that's the way, like we was talking about human nature before, weren't we? Whilst we can still get everything we want conveniently, we may well, and it might take a little change in circumstance to eke out some of these other qualities and processes and techniques. Our elders, such as Jacqueline, are masters of soft skills. We have so much to learn. Yeah, that's why I get Jacqueline here every Tuesday night for that very reason. Yeah, but it's true, isn't it? Because I think the younger mind thinks it is all about technology and technique and the tactics, the 3 T's there. But it's nothing is possible really unless the environment's right. Which I think it's the soft skills that create the environment. And if you were to believe that you were being nurtured as part of a community rather than you were fighting for your place within it, you'd get entirely different results, wouldn't you?
Well, I even if you are fighting for your place in it, or you feel like that, I think the way always to get the best out of people is to be encouraging. I know I'm an encourager because it comes naturally to me, because I respond to it so much myself.
Yeah.
I love to be encouraged. I like to be patted on the back and to have people say nice things about me. So I only come on the show really, Carl, to hear those lovely things people say about me.
And they always do. That's great. It's such a self-fulfilling prophecy because it always happens as well.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Just like,
Yeah.
and you know, we're like kids, really, aren't we? We like to learn, and we like to be encouraged to learn. I'm still learning every single day. And I'm learning about technology, and it's getting there.
Yeah.
Each time something changes, and I think, oh my goodness, do I know how to do that one? And it's never quite the same, you know. Putting pictures on Facebook isn't the same as putting pictures up on my website, which I now do really successfully.
Okay.
So, yeah. But yes, yeah, things actually that reminds me of something again. I'm talking rather a lot, aren't I?
No,
You have to check me up if I'm talking too much. But when we lived in Gloucester, there was an old seed bank, and people came. We had a few cider making pear type trees in our garden, which apparently were planted when I can't remember. Maybe it was the French Revolution or something like that, and they weren't making champagne, but they made perry, which
Perry, yeah.
is a sort of pear cider, and it requires these. I mean, to eat them would be horrible, but when you squeeze them, they're juicy. But people used to come and take photographs of them because we had 3 of these trees, which had been there for hundreds of years, and but they collected the seeds. And there was a seed bank of apple seeds, of old varieties of apples, and old varieties of plums and things like that. So I think that seed exchange thing's a very good thing.
There are some groups. I guess it's a matter of connecting the dots, isn't it, and bringing things together. I've just found one actually. This is a seed swapping group in Portugal, so they do exist. And that's in the comments now, and I'll pop it up on the screen. That link should take you to it. That is a Seed Swap Portugal. Swap seeds, seedlings, cuttings, and plants. Fantastic, and over 1,000 members in there. So we need to sort of connect up those networks, don't we? And get the balance right, because like I was saying before, you know, there are some people who are really busy in their gardens and understandably don't want to be posting up pictures at the end of the day. But I also think it's quite useful and very encouraging to other people when that does happen. I've been very inspired by, you know, people doing that. Who's the guy? The most recent one, the Weedy Garden, I think he's called, or the Weedy Gardener. He was a photographer, an Australian guy, whose whose work was shut down because of the lockdown and pandemic. So he decided to use his photography skills in a plot, and it has created this fantastic garden that makes the most wonderful videos. The Weedy Garden, possibly, Australian fella. That seed bank sounds amazing. Seed swapping groups are a great way to build the foundation of a local seed bank. I'm in. So we've got Carmen for sure working with us. Actually, what I meant to ask you, Carmen, was where you're settling. I don't know, Janetta San Miguel. Where is that? That is in Portugal, I take it, but I'm not familiar with that. Jacqueline, we are at our hour threshold, and it's not normally at this time of the evening where you share a bit of an insight or even set us some homework for the week. Do you remember?
Everybody does their homework.
But that's because you're so nice. No one fears they're going to get shouted at or anything like that.
Oh, well, you know, that could change, couldn't it?
It could, couldn't it? Bad cop.
Well, maybe we should all work on a vision of our gardens all sort of being mixed up together, because that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Share seeds and share plants.
Yeah.
And I know that we had to cancel a visit that you were going to make here. But I had plants already for you to take back. So, you know, the Lord had spoken to me about plants. So he's interested in everything, and that's what I will say. Yeah. That's where I'll end, really, that we can start to think more about cultivating people.
Yeah.
And somebody in my position maybe can't get out and do the digging anymore, which I used to love, but I can work with people until I take my last breath. And I hope that doesn't come too soon, because there's lots of people need me. And yeah, and cultivate the garden, because we can learn from one to the other. So I think this has been a wonderful evening. So we'll be gardening people and gardening gardens.
Beautiful.
With the people.
Beautiful. Carmen says, oh, it's the Azores, of course, isn't it? The Azores, the west coast of San Miguel, about 25 kilometers from Ponta Delgado. What a fantastic place. Carmen, when you get there, will you send us some tea, please? I want to try Portuguese tea from the Azores. That sounds, it sounds such a beautiful place to visit as well. What a great choice. I'm looking forward to you being there. Cultivating people, the perfect motto. Works on a number of levels, doesn't it? Cultivating people and cultivating people. So thank you so much, Jacqueline, for being here tonight and sharing that with us. We've had a lovely evening.
All the inputs from people.
Yeah, it has been wonderful. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Joel, Gillian, Karen, Nunu, Sintra, and everyone else. Dave and Debbie, who were here earlier on as well. So yes, Portuguese tea. Did you know that there was Portuguese tea? And it is from the Azores over there. So thanks to all of you. We'll see you tomorrow morning on the Good Morning Portugal show. And thank you so much for this. It's a pleasure. It really is a pleasure, Carmen. We often, Jacqueline and I, don't know what we're going to talk about. We allow ourselves to be guided and influenced, and fingers crossed, or put hands together, I should say, it usually works out for the best. And cheers later all from Sapphira as well. It's so good to have you, Sapphira, as our consultant on matters of Portuguese culture. Yeah, so join me in the morning for the Good Morning Portugal show, and tomorrow evening, just let me get her second name right. I've got a special guest tomorrow evening. I think it might be in a different stream of my messages all over the place. But the wonderful lady who was with us for the laughter yoga, Jennifer, is going to be back tomorrow night doing an expat chat with me, which I think is going to be a whole lot of fun. That's where we've taken out of I do a lot of leisurely chats, and actually so far it's been only with women. I'm getting a bad name. I'm very happy to talk to male expats as well, but so far I think tomorrow night with our expat chat from 10 o'clock, it will have be the fifth or sixth woman I've interviewed, and no fellas so far. I do apologize. It's not Jenny. It's Joanne. Joanne Helms is with me tomorrow night. We had such a hoot doing some laughter yoga on a Friday morning about a month ago. It was great fun, and she is quite a character and has been here quite a while in Portugal with a great story to tell, and she wants to do a bit of laughter yoga tomorrow night. So Joanne Helms will be with me for the expat chat tomorrow night from 10 o'clock, which I think will be a lot of fun. It's a good night, lovely people from a Facebook user. That might be Owen, possibly. And thank you for a very informational show. Good night, Carl and Jacqueline. Hope to see you on the show again. This is a residency, Sintra, for Jacqueline. She is our expat elder and the grandmother of our community. So always here on a Tuesday night, should ever you wish to be in her company. Jacqueline, thanks again, and bye for now.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Lovely to be here.